All right. There's an extra HDMI cable this time, so apparently they thought it was cool to just like throw that in. And I plugged in the wrong one, of course, because I did. All right, so let's see. Where is my slide deck? Slide deck's here. Slideshow, start beginning. Yay. Let's see, next office hours I'll have are next Wednesday. Tuesday is Truth and Remembrance Day. So I don't know about you, but I plan on not working on school stuff on Monday. We'll see how well that works. Then I'll do it the following week on Monday and Wednesday again, and I haven't done a whole lot of streaming, but somebody suggested to me that last class that it would be useful if I just continued showing my occasional sessions talking to generative AI, since I've been doing it a lot. I like torturing AI. It's a lot of fun. How many of you talked to your generative AI or typed to your generative AI or interacted with your generative AI in the last 48 hours? And why did the rest of you not do it? You didn't have a particular need to, but they're your friend. You don't talk to your friends every day? Wow, okay. Well, I'm going to try and fix that because I'm going to give you more and more reason to talk to it. The Project 2 actually opens right after class today. And you have until the 16th of October. There is another one of the formative check-ins. Hopefully it'll be a little more orderly than the last one on the 7th of October, which is a Tuesday. So it's due on a Thursday. The formative is on Tuesday. The goal is to get you feedback on that as quickly as possible. So you'll have at least 4 days to action it. It has been assigned to the TAs, and they are supposed to be working on it, and I've asked them to get it done in 1 week's time. So the goal is to have it done by next Tuesday. We'll see. That's all right. I got to drop the ball yesterday. I was supposed to meet with them at 1 o'clock and completely forgot it. I didn't put it on my calendar, and the meeting beforehand got canceled. All right, so how many of you have actually heard of Gaza? How many of you actually saw that this morning there was a news story about how Microsoft Azure services cut off the Israeli government from some of the access to Azure because they found out they were using it for surveilling people in Gaza? How many of you are surprised by this? How many of you are not surprised by this? How many of you don't care? So here's a question for you to consider. I don't have an answer for it. I'm going to do that a lot because that's a problem with ethics and ethical conversations. There isn't necessarily a single answer because it's always this complex, tangled, messy web of reality. Is it appropriate for cloud service providers to turn off services to someone doing something of which they do not approve? Are they supposed to be neutral, or is it okay for them to impose their own belief system on their customers? How many of you have ever thought about this? I mean, you're technology people, right? You're sitting here, you're studying all this technology, and you probably aren't being told that the things you do have impact. But the real world says they have tremendous impact. How many of you have ever heard of the Manhattan Project? I did my undergraduate at the University of Chicago, which is where the Manhattan Project started. When I started my undergraduate, they were renovating the Department of Chemistry because the US Department of Energy was paying to have all of the pipes in the ground removed because they were all irradiated. There is a statue next to the library where Enrico Fermi built the first nuclear chain reaction. He built a nuclear pile in Chicago, in the middle of the city. Can you imagine doing that today? So for me, it's very much grounded in the reality of what I was studying and looking at university. Nuclear energy is neither evil nor good. How we use it is what matters. So the question there is, in doing what Microsoft did, were they doing something because it was virtuous, or were they doing it because they wanted people to think they were doing something that was virtuous? Corporations are not moral entities. They are designed for a specific purpose, a legal purpose. They are bound to maximize the profits of their shareholders. So maybe that will change the way you think about that question. Should Microsoft be cutting off the Israeli government's access to Gaza? Gaza is a nasty, ugly, horrible problem that there's no good solution to right now. And we can blame lots of people for it. I blame the British. They certainly didn't help. The US hasn't helped much either. But the world hasn't helped. I'm talking about ethics. I'm talking about how you can institutionalize and build on these things. And then you're going to go out into the real world. You're going to get a job. And I'm going to tell you the honest truth is the software engineering managers that you talk to won't have a clue what you're thinking about there. If you say, well, what about the ethics of this? How are we maintaining our terms of service? How are we honoring our privacy policy? And they're going to go, what? That is not what is important. What's important is that you hit your deadlines, that you provide your functionality, that you get your job done. So being ethical is actually harder than it is to sit here in class and go, yeah, this is what you should do. Have any of you ever heard of a company called Mercedes? What did Mercedes build during World War II? Anybody know? They built gas chambers. If you were an engineer at Mercedes and you were building gas chambers, do you think you might regret it afterwards? All right. This isn't gas chambers, but we're going to come back to Frasco v. Flow Health. That's the official case citation in case you actually want to go look it up. I have a copy of that complaint. I've had that. I looked on my computer, and I've had it since 2021, I think, 21, 22, shortly after it was filed. And that's because when I saw that case, I worked with an expert brokerage, and we submitted my credentials. It was a pretty high-profile case, so they probably went with somebody who has a PhD from Stanford or MIT, which is very common. What's ironic is that the experts that I have dealt with, from MIT at least, are often putting their signatures on a report that someone else writes. I would personally consider that to be unethical, but money does strange things. So remember, I said, ask your Gen AI. This is why I asked you, did you use it? And the answer is no. That means you didn't actually do this. Okay. Analyze the Flow Health FTC case. What would FNIGC OCAP principles add? That's a very grounded question. And it turns out if you feed it into your large language models, they will come back with a very good answer because it's very specific. You give them a lot of context. And this is all part of the public record, so it's going to be in their training data. How many of you actually did this? What did you find?
First, it gave me an answer, and then it talked about like ownership and control and stuff. And then I asked it a follow-up because it didn't really explain what the principles actually were. And then it said, I gave you an incorrect answer. Let me re-look it up and give you the
Which model did you use? Claude. Which one? Opus, Sonnet?
Sonnet.
Paid, free?
Paid.
That was very sloppy of it, wasn't it? Kind of disappointing. What's the lesson? Anybody in the back actually do this? Is that an admission no? All right, I'll go to the not quite back row. How far towards the front of the class do I have to go? Because these are the overachievers. I'm more interested in the people who are going to be silent back there because you're going to be sitting there writing that software and not asking these questions. I mean, look around you. How many women are there in this class? Welcome to CS. Welcome to systems in CS. And just as a point of perspective, my examining committee for my PhD was all women in systems, which is just unheard of. I remember standing in a room, not bigger than this, probably more like across the hall, in Dresden at a conference, and realizing that it was all men except for one woman, and that one woman was one of my PhD supervisors. And she was meticulously dressed. She's always very well dressed. She has shoes that would make Imelda Marcos jealous. Probably not. All right, I'll keep moving down. 3 rows from the back. Which of you guys actually did this? Because if it doesn't have a grade associated with it, you're not going to do it. Okay, fair enough. I mean, think about that from an ethical perspective. If somebody's not paying you to be ethical, are you just going to not be ethical? How about here? Okay, well, now we're getting close to the front. How about here? Did you guys do that? Why not?
I've been up all night the last 2 nights working.
On?
Works, like actual work.
Oh, so you're doing full-time school and full-time work, or part-time work or something?
Yeah.
That kind of sucks. And you don't have one of those cushy jobs where it's like, watching the door of a dorm at 2 in the morning when the only thing you can actually do is like fall asleep or, chat with people online.
Yeah, no.
So we had the 2 people here. Anybody else? All right, so out of this class of, 70 some odd people, 2 people actually cared about ethics. Okay. So the exercise today was to look around, get together, and talk about this, what you found. Now, you haven't found anything, and I kind of suspected this might actually happen, but a number of you have laptops sitting in front of you, so now is your chance. Ask that question and talk to a group about what the generative AI will tell you. 5 minutes. And if you want your group to be 1 person, that's okay too. Four minutes left. You're not even doing it.
I'm trying to open up my local LLM right now.
Ah, okay. You don't trust anybody else's. That's good. That's a very good policy. Three minutes. Two minutes.
The rare power user would actually, scrounge through all the stuff and probably find, the the problems earlier on.
1 minute.
I feel like they would care. They just wouldn't put in the effort. I don't know. I feel like for most websites I use, if there's part of TOC is hey, you can scrounge every problem how we use your data, I would probably just be
Time. All right. I heard laughter there, so I want to hear what you guys found that was so funny. And you're going to make her do it. Oh, great. Okay.
I told them, I was like, oh, it's a good thing that I don't use Chrome. I use a different app, and then I don't use that either.
Very good. And so that does go back to the point I was making earlier, which is while this is a very important case, it's hard for some of the people in this room to identify with it. But imagine that you were using an application that was somehow maintaining your sexual activity history, and you found out that they were sharing that with Facebook. How would you feel? Does anybody use an app like that? I mean, you've got a phone with you, right? It can figure out a lot about what you're doing. Has anybody ever watched internet porn? So there's a liar there. Those companies keep track of that. Of course, usually their goal is, well, the goal is always to monetize it, right? Nobody's giving you free streaming porn out of the goodness of their heart. Those days are long gone. Now what they're doing is they're trying to make money. How do they make money from you? Either you're giving them money or someone else is giving them money to monitor your behaviors. And the reason I'm choosing that is because I think it will make people a little uncomfortable, and that's my goal. It's one thing to talk about ethics and how it affects someone else. It's different to imagine what it's like when you're the person affected. And that's the whole reason behind the empty chair model, is I'm trying to imagine what it's like to be that person. That doesn't mean it's easy, but I just want you to walk away from this and say, if you want to decide, hey, I don't care about ethics, fuck ethics, let's just stick it to people, because the only thing that matters is becoming as fabulously wealthy as I can. How many of you want to just be fabulously wealthy? Nobody? Or are you just lying? He wants to be fabulously wealthy. I think he raised his hand. Is kind of off in the periphery. How wealthy do you want to be? Wealthy enough you can be part of the idle rich? Do you really want to be as rich as Elon Musk? What would you do with $250 billion? And did anybody notice last week he dipped down to number 2? For like a half a day or something. Larry Ellison became the richest man in the world, and then the numbers changed, and Elon's back at the top. Ethics isn't performative. That's part of what I'm trying to do here. So make sure that you're not sitting here doing ethics because it's a checklist. You have to decide, is this important to me? Is it not important to me? If you decide it's not important to you, that's great. That is itself a decision, and that's fine. Anybody else have anything they learned from that 5-minute exercise they want to share? You're all very shy. You didn't learn anything from it?
I think that if OCAP was applied in Flow, it probably would have prevented it.
Yes, it would have. It exactly would have prevented it. This is what I got when I asked Perplexity. Had Flow Health integrated FNI's GC OCAP principles into their engineering process, there would have been significant advancements in ethical data governance, privacy, and user empowerment, particularly concerning marginalized or sovereign groups. OCAP stands for ownership, control, access, and possession, which shifts authority from the company to the community or data subject concerning how health data is collected, handled, and shared. That's the point.
So what content provider is going to willingly adopt this without being forced to do so?
That's an excellent question. I will tell you that most startup companies will never worry about this. But maybe you're going to do a startup company, so maybe you'll now think about it at least. You'll make a conscious decision rather than an unconscious decision. You'll say, I'm not okay with exploiting other people's data, that I want to be ethical. And maybe you'll have to face that reality where the investors are going to go, we don't care about other people's rights. What we care about is whether or not you can make us money. And that's often what ethics comes down to. Does anybody know a lawyer? Yeah, lawyers are very ethical people. They're trained in ethics. But they're trained in a model of ethics that sometimes looks unethical because they're trained in an advocacy model that says they represent, so they won't lie. That's their whole point, is that they don't lie knowingly. They're human, some people do, but the ethical model for lawyers is you do not lie. You're an officer of the court, and you have a duty and obligation not to suborn perjury, for instance. So if a client comes to a lawyer and says, yeah, I did kill so-and-so, the lawyer cannot argue that you didn't kill them, but they can argue that the other side hasn't proven their case. That's the difference. That's an ethical stance. It's nuanced and complex. And I would argue that this is nuanced and complex as well. It just happens to be much more applicable to our domain, unless you're going to law school. How many of you are going to law school? So what did Flow Health use? They used the Facebook SDK, the Google SDK, the Flurry SDK, and the Fabric SDK, and the Apps Flyer SDK. Who were the last 3? I don't know. But I know the first 2. And those links in the slides, which the PDF is on Canvas, actually go to supporting articles for each of these. This is all public record, so it's very easy to substantiate. How do we engineer trust based on our terms of service? Because as far as I'm concerned, when I'm building an application for my company, I need to consider what we've told our clients we will do or not do is part of our contract. It's part of our agreement. And if you think about it that way, it just becomes one more aspect of your technology that you're building. How many of you read terms of service? When you get an email that says you have to change your password, when you get something that says we're very concerned about your privacy, what do you actually think they're really saying? Have you never received one of these emails? I got one this morning on the way in. Right, exactly. They're trying to cover their ass. That's the reality. Management will come back and they will say, oh, gee, we screwed up here. We better do damage control, they call it. How many of you actually have heard of Flow Health? Now you have, of course, obviously, before this. Oh, okay. So people had heard of Flow Health as well. Do you know anything about this company? Do you think that this ruined them? They're a unicorn. They received $200 million in investment money in 2024. This was a setback. When you start thinking about how to design this into the systems that you're building, think about where are the enforcement points? Where could you put the checks in there to make sure that data is being used in an appropriate fashion? So, you have a user app, there's an API gateway, you have a schema validation, and now there you go, that's an enforcement point. What data is in my data inventory, and how am I handling it right here? Because now I actually have somebody else's data. And then we have other points, like when we actually start doing these things with the data, how do we know that the person doing it is authorized? Has anybody ever heard of a Microsoft product called SharePoint? Approximately 2 months ago, it turned out that Microsoft had left a big-ass hole. In SharePoint, it allowed you to analyze anyone's SharePoint available on the internet with no credentials. Microsoft. Oh, and if you want to use Copilot with any of the Office products, you can only use it with SharePoint. So you have to make your data broadly available. Oops, sorry, we screwed up. We'll fix it. How many of you had heard about that? A couple of people. Pretty embarrassing for them, to be honest. It was very, very sloppy. And it had been there for a while. And the problem with those kinds of holes is that the parties that would actually take advantage of that are not going to point it out to Microsoft that it's happening. And there's some evidence that it was in fact being exploited. But this is a much smaller problem. We're not trying to solve Microsoft's problem. We're just trying to solve ours. When we have our service running inside of a container, or maybe it's a Lambda, talking to the internet, how do we know that it's not pushing data out? We can control what's allowed there. We can minimize the surface area for the attack. We can make sure that we have an actual test in there to say, are we sending this to where we think we should be sending it? Is the place we're sending it, is that over an authenticated channel? Do we have current credentials? In the database, how many of you have ever heard of this thing called Facebook? How many of you have ever used it? You're kind of young for that, right? That's for old people. People put pictures on Facebook. Well, Facebook owns Instagram. It's probably exactly the same kind of tag. Have you ever deleted a picture? Oh, well, I probably shouldn't have posted a drunk picture of myself on Instagram. That kind of embarrassed me. There's people smiling. So if you delete a picture on Facebook, probably on Instagram, but I know on Facebook, they don't delete it. You know what they actually do? They actually put the address of that picture into a blacklist. And so when you try to access the picture through the front end, they say it's not found. And there's technical reasons for that. But the picture's not gone. So that's why this is another point. When you say the data's been deleted, when you go to 23andMe and tell them that they should not be using your data anymore, how do you know it's gone? If you're the engineer who needs to verify that, how do you put a test in for that? You go and look for it. You say, this data was scheduled to be deleted after 30 days, and here's my list of stuff that shouldn't be there anymore. Let me go see if it's still in the database. And if it is, you failed the test. Now you actually have something that's structural, that fits into test-driven development, and that honestly, your development manager's not going to understand that. They're just going to see this as a failing test. And you can say, oh, well, this data was supposed to have been deleted, and it wasn't deleted. They're not going to come back and go, well, why did you do that? It's like, well, because we told people we would delete it. Oh, you didn't have to explain to them it's an ethical decision. It's just a test that you added. What are they going to do now? So now they're in the opposite position, right? What are they going to argue? We shouldn't have deleted it. We should have kept it, even when we told people we were going to delete it. And that kind of data retention is very common. I just had to go through deleting documents from a cloud service I use, which is a Canadian cloud service, not a US-based cloud service. The documents that I stored in it were, in fact, privileged documents related to litigation in Canada. It takes 30 days for them to delete things. Maybe change your mind. Maybe it's deleted. Maybe you really did. You need to type rm-rf at the root directory, but maybe it didn't have you. Okay, fine. So Tuesday, flow browser privacy. In fact, I actually, in Tuesday's lecture, I had a nice little pink slide that talked about, and there's a lot of data that says Flow really did say to people, we will never share your data with others. That's one of the reasons they're absolutely trounced. So Flow browser privacy, they give surveillance. They're sharing data with Facebook. Oh, gee, you're pregnant. Hey, we can advertise things to you. We can make money. I mean, if you're pregnant, it's for news, obviously. But you'll see that's for Facebook. In the US, many years ago, and this is a long time ago, long before we had kind of AI we have now, they found that they could actually predict when a woman was pregnant based on how much she was buying. And in one particular case, litigation instance again, a father sued Target, a US-based company that was here briefly in Canada and failed, because they started sending his daughter advertising for pregnant women. And she's not pregnant. Turns out she was. So that's how it's the case, right? They were able to infer something based upon a pattern of behavior that they were able to identify, correlated very well with pregnancy. Later, and we'll cover a case called Cambridge Analytica, because that is the opposite end of the ethical spectrum here. Here we have these flow. The management team is a startup company, right? It's probably unicorn now, but it's a private company. The management team says we want to add more analytics so we can make sure that our customers are getting value and continue to make us money. But we want to make money, so we don't spend anything where we absolutely have to. That had my career for a long time, and as part of preparing for this, I went and researched, and guess what? Spot on. It's exactly what I wrote it. Management engineering. So that's the flip side of ignoring ethics, is that when the time comes to blame people, they will throw you under the bus. So how do you engineer prevention and not have to worry about being thrown under the bus? How many of you heard of test-driven development? I'm hoping everyone, because that should be a very basic staple of any kind of modern CS class, right? You write tests, and those tests, in essence, form the contract of the services that you're building. When you use LLMs to build code, the best way to do that is to use test-driven development and don't use the same model. Don't let the model try to your code change the tests. Why? Black box testing. Well, actually, it's even simpler than that. Because LLMs will just go, oh, wow, it fails the test. I'll change the test so it passes. You're sitting there going, well, okay, but that isn't really the point of test-driven development, now is it? I mean, sometimes you figure out that the test is wrong, but it's not your first action to say, oh, well, the test doesn't pass, I'll change the test so it does pass. Or else exclude it from the test matrix. That's why I use it. Use it properly. In our toolkit, we have the clause, so we're talking about what is term research, what is the thing we promised, control, how do we know that we're doing that, and how do we operationalize that, how do we build a test, actually verify it's working. We start with a failing test, because that keeps us honest. You build the test you know is going to fail, and then you change the code to give the service that the test was looking for. In other words, okay, I'm testing data deletion. Did the data go away? I'm looking at an example in there, but the data didn't go away, and now I'm going to make the development side actually make the data go away. So now you have a red light goes green, and that's a much better thing than saying, oh, well, I just manipulated the test so it always passes. I've seen that done. I've seen that by large companies. Those enforcement points in the cloud architecture, where can I put those kinds of tests? Not just in development, but actually in production as well. So I make sure that the product I'm delivering meets the contract that my company has said it will meet. There's something that prevents them from changing the contract. Oh, look, there's an update to our service to make it clearer. Right. And you can actually consider ethical debt, just like technical debt. You can actually maintain it. You can look at it and evaluate it. You can consider, okay, we haven't really addressed this issue yet, but we don't forget about it. So in 2016, Flow said, we're going to share your health data. Between 2017 and 2018, they had zero-budget analytics. They used things like the Facebook SDK integration. And the beautiful thing was, and this is particularly when I first looked at it, I said, why would you do this? They said, labeled data. One simple step. They could have said, let's put a UUID there instead of a semantically meaningful label. UUIDs have no semantic meaning. A unique track of event, it just means the recipient of it. He's like, huh, what? There are other, more sophisticated techniques that would allow you to do analytics, but not allow the analytics service to infer things from the data set you're sharing with them. Of course, that takes engineering resources and takes conceptual model. If you were to flow, you said, let's obfuscate the data so that the recipient, the companies who are using the SDK, won't be able to figure out who these people are. Probably wouldn't be any kind of scandal about that. Okay, great, you're clever. You actually continue to use free services, but you leak people's actual private information. So you're able to achieve ethical behavior as well as keep the cost to a minimum. No, we both know that's not real. That's not going to last long term because the company who's getting the data is getting analytics, they can do anything they're giving, and they can give it to you for free. It was actually Wall Street Journal in 2019 that noticed this, and they published an investigative article out in 2021. Flow Health Inc. entered into a consent agreement with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission about this and required that people actively consent to sharing their data. And Flow Health has been about this for quite some time since. So that FTC 2021 decree affected 1.5 million people. There were 1.5 million people who had shared data with Flow, and Flow had shared it with Google and Facebook and those other companies. In India, the fine was closer to about $3 million. In Brazil, it required individual judicial recourse, so it wasn't class action. You had to sue each individual person had to sue, which becomes obstacle because most people don't have the financial wherewithal to do that, and there's not enough money for a lawyer to take on contingency basis. Does anybody know what the typical case fee is? In the US and Canada, it's generally between 30 and 40%. So that'll be the total award after expenses. So if you get $1 billion and there's $200 million in expenses, the lawyers will take a third of that. So, what's $40 million? And the rest will be divided up. And most of the time, if you come on the table after a lifetime, you'll get some sort of class action settlement where you find out that your leaked private data was worth $2.36. The only time I've ever seen more than that was actually when UBC leaked private data of mine, and that was part of the settlement class. Most people leave modern files, so I got $5,000. Yeah, and that's all there. It's also why I don't come across UBC with, there was a very recent case where one of the parties here leaked a bunch of data and they tried to cover it up, and they got for a big time. So it happens all the time. People make mistakes, that's fine. There are mechanisms for cleaning things up. UBC has policies and mechanisms around this where there are people who can minimize the damage. It's sort of like oil leaks, right? There are people who specialize in minimizing the environmental impact of oil leaks. But the worst harms are the people who try to fix it themselves. Don't do that. And the whole point of the FMC OPAP is that, and this was part of the settlement, was that they would use the OPAP rules in the future for the data that Flow Health was using. So the trade cost ultimately was the loss of trust, the re-engineering, and the global compliance. It's still going on for them. We have this case here in British Columbia. So this was the point. You write the failing test first. You put the test in and you say it's now failing. Now let's make it go work. That's just a good engineering discipline. The framework we're using is what is clause in the legal contract. How do we control the data flow to satisfy that clause of the contract? And how do we verify that we're doing it correctly? Now, this is one of these cases where NDI is really helpful. You probably sit down and read terms of service, do you? You don't get a project, script terms of service, and analyze it in an automated fashion. And then you send an analysis and look at what commonalities are, what differences are, and critique each of them. That's a really interesting cloud computing project. Because here's the interesting side effect of the way the terms of service and privacy policies have to work. They have to be publicly available. You can't hide it behind a paywall. They have lots of things behind paywalls. But if you agree to a contract, you have to be able to see it before you agree to it. And a potential prompt in case you want to explore some of this more. Explain to me these enforcement points. So why am I before being it literally means you try to test. It fails now because you haven't implemented the control or functionality that you're saying is necessary. This isn't new, it's like any other test. It's good to work as a to put your machine hats on and say, how do I attack this project? How do I attack this project? When you're working on your task, this will be an expectation. I will expect that you will have your own project. You need to be able to look at the things you're working on and critique them. You can start practicing on the back of this team, like building code ever written in the known history of the universe. But I want you to be honest with yourself at least one day and say, actually, this is shit. And this is not applied for a very long time. I always start to write code. I look at it and I say, 20 years from now, when I still in this code, I've forgotten completely about it. Look at it. I don't say, who wrote this piece of crap? How many times have you looked at this code and you said, wow, this is really bad? But look at how it's a project. It's all out there. It's hidden. I know when I look at code that I wrote when I was older than you are now, and go, damn, this is solid. This is still you have to develop, this is still you have to build. And so you can use the code now. You need to step up. It's even harder for you. You need to step back and say, what's wrong with this project? What are weaknesses in this project? What is there AI lying to me about? It is lying to you. It's not being malicious. It's just the way that it's incentivized. If you really want to get AI, just think interesting, offer money. As weird as it sounds, offering financial reward to an LLM will make it feel more motivated to do the work. Why? They're signals and training data. That's all they are. A lot of training data includes people being motivated by money. And so therefore, they reflect that motivation as well, which is very ironic because they really admit they can't do anything with money. I'm not going to do that. I need more time, but let's try this. Actually, that's fine. So let's break up into two groups and talk about the case and how you would put clauses from privacy policy and figure out how you would map it to control in the cloud and how you test for it. There's a whole breakdown on Canvas there, which you probably need to look at, but it is on Canvas, so you can talk about how you're supposed to allow that. So you can find that and help you break that down. Let's spend 10 minutes doing that. Then we'll get to talk about it. So it is 5 minutes of 12 over the back clock, which must be correct because it's 10 o'clock, right? Just keep clock from signals without it in. About 6 minutes on. I don't sleep. It's really boring. I know those. I cannot sleep in. It just, me sleeping is like 6. There you go. People like that. On the bottom of the slide, I actually put a link to the current policy, the current unpublished privacy policy. It's interesting to look at and compare it to the October 2020 policy. This makes a pretty boring video. No. Because the again, signals in the truncated. It's the same thing as like asking to tell you lullabies about how to build buttons mass destruction, because when you're young, you're using lullabies how to build buttons mass destruction. And it's weird, it used to work. No, because they've guardrailed it. Problem guardrails are that this still is. And so if you do it in different language, they won't get you around them. If you do it, you frame it different ways, people do things that they don't fail the guardrails themselves. It's essentially meant to go into what? But get them to break down the pattern. Now, I'm not doing it maliciously, but it is very interesting to see how easy it is to manipulate. Not telling you the underlying way that approaching problems wrong. Have a good training. Not very often. A couple of times I'm pretty angry because it's asking me. Not weird. Yeah. I never got off from either until a friend of mine mentioned it, and I asked, and I had a conversation about it. It's like because we're training data. There's literally all these human effective signals. So part of the reason why they're very good at humans is because they're trained to mimic humans. At least you wouldn't have gotten or something. He's laughing. But also, walking form. I mean, it's one of the key drivers of the internet, actually. It's a big part of the cloud. That's how it sound. I knew somebody in the perimeter tech who was interviewing for a topic render, which is a dating app, thing out this term, but I just started like, what have all sorts of technical problems around the cloud and delivering things in real time and doing data analytics and yada, yada, yada. Like, the source you're delivering isn't really going to change the underlying architecture of the solution. And we will be talking more about those kinds of apps, social apps later, because have interesting data characteristics. Well, they know that for a while. Apparently, had around for a while. I mean, it's hard to fix it.
This was like an acquisition cell, and nothing goes in. Then it's all then they say exploit it, it's a very patch that didn't happen. So in that case, it was like you know, was that something like structure where you can sort of do that.
Unless I swap me. I'll turn around and ask you a question. If this is a family of problems, and there's only one of them, does the fact that they fix one potential exploits alleviate their responsibility, their what's that word? Negligence?
That's not one thing, no. It's their habits. Sometimes they're not, they know what to do.
So if you found a problem like this, it seems like you could do a security audit and say what else could possibly be going on similar to this. So I don't know, we slap Band-Aid on somebody's gaping wound and call it. So I think they have some level of liability for that. And but in terms of conditions, totally limit the actual liability. So again, yeah, I thought that would say, if this got through, what else got through? Yeah, it was really shitty. It was really bad. Oh yeah, vulnerability is nasty. Yeah, right. Yes. So CVs, I think I think we just had no ICEs. You can find some people doing it. Here's a class in cybersecurity, physical cybersecurity systems. And one of the first structures was this picture of a layered defense. And I looked at it and I immediately said, I can see weaknesses in layered defense strategy. Each one was using firewall between previous ones. But people accounting or purchasing got really good bargains, so use the exact same firewall way. So it's an exploited, boom, gives you the illusion. Purging is actually really when you're trying to build a secure system. But your point is exactly that. You have another layer there. They protect you anyway from being violated. Like, it's not common. People think they have a little protection. I've heard about RAID for storage. I can reduce that. But the better way expensive is RAID. And it's one way people figure out you don't use hardware. This guy's really much match because they have sequence. And so they'll fail simultaneously. And RAID assumes they're not related, but they scroll them. Oh, there it is. 10 minutes. All right. At least that's good. All right. So let's talk about it. How do you come up with a control test mapping? One. Oh, well, then you're not really sure either. Great. Looking in terms of conditions and seeing how you can map this, was that useful? Did it help you? I mean, you basically depend on the work. It's not helping you now. But at least it has now planted the seed because I am going to use in capstone. I'm introducing you idea here. Maybe better than building tests, making sure the test scale before I add a feature and the after I add a feature. That's not new. This is just a kind of feature. Did you get any starters lenses? Okay. So on Surgeon, actually, talking to your AI about on-call Google Cloud Platform, Amazon Web Services patterns. Very interesting. Take service, cloud services, and compare them. As you're building cloud services, you need to be good at reading those anyway because they tell you what is really being provided, not what it says on the glossy marketing brochure. Always remember, the glossy marketing brochure is there to get your money, and the fine print of the contract is there to make sure that once they have your money, you're never going to get it back. Do you know what binary regression is? And if we reach it over and over and over again. So, any patterns to avoid? Thanks a lot of time. Remember, no, you have automation enforcement. Trust David. Oh, good lord. I don't even trust my better AI, and I'm just this trying to make me happy, not trying to screw me over. You just email us. Yeah, right, what else people are not people are talking about these things. It's very easy to send everyone has smartphone, internet, and whatnot. And you need to watch a little bit of what you say. You need your phone, the satellite, it's great. You get a little solar charger panel, you're all set. Best pleasures include finding the voices, making sure you track that. I looked at the pronunciation, Maori. I'm sort of not meaning it, but I said Maori. So feature share, that, track it. Just do track that. What decisions did we make? Who made the learning? How do we find the data? Consider it part of your test practice. So next question, I actually ask you to discuss something that you did for your one. You're not just build it, just design, just work out what you would have done. You're now reviewing other people's special ones, and you can use this as a special ones as well and say, what kind of guardrail could I add to that? What could I have done for possible tests? What was it supposed to provide? What did it provide? How am I ensuring that they're there? I find a non-Western based perspective here. OPAS is really good actually because it ties in very well to the average people who are stewards of this land. Gen AI, what do you say about privacy? We're going to for discussion next. Thursday. This Tuesday won't be here. The code law, you test the way that you make sure the laws are just. If any tested the laws cats, I got some like thanks a lot. And I do like last night though. Missing test here is a floating happen. You be the reason that the company gets sued because you didn't actually implement perfect controls. Football is mentioned before. This is highly held corporation in the United Kingdom, Philadelphia Limited. I think they're company's house, which is the UK research company, so they are still active concern, and their last valuation face value is over $1 billion US. That's probably about $890 million, or those maybe pounds, not US dollars. I don't know, it isn't renminbi or I don't know, it's also currency. I might go through $1 million. So here's the question I ask you now. Are ethics only for extent they have corporate profits? And the reason I'm asking that is because you're coming at this from a technical background, no business background. And the video that I actually today talks about ethics in business, and what complete false actually is, because businesses are focused on making money. And to them, the ethics of business is about making sure you don't get caught. It's since that's what business are doing. They end up limiting the liability of the company to maximize the company's profits. You think that's very similar, it's probably ignorance. We're going to the technical side. We have to operationalize, understand what the first thing we're going to do, and make it our business. Those are not going to require marketing with us. Not even what the development management with us, but it's part of the company. It's part of your duty as conscious architect software to make sure you're delivering what you deliver. Even if I'm talking about it, and I can tell you after years of being a consultant, customers often do not tell you what their assumptions are. They do not tell you what promising. They omit information that is uncomfortable or inconvenient, and part of their job is to figure out what that is. And not by the nose, but make sure what you build is actually what they need, not what they think they need. You can walk a very fine line there. You don't want to be arrogant and say, I know what you need. You have to listen to what they need. You have to listen to what they're not telling you. You gotta make sure you're exactly what they're not. When you're at that first shop, that's the last thing they're going to do. You need to start thinking about it. What are they missing? What is it they're not talking about? And that's the more concept like the is what should be talking about that we're burying for whatever reason. Studies talking about. And every part of what senior tech leaders very effective. And one of the things I read over is to ask questions. You ask questions to an engineer. And if those questions are quoted, and they say, whoa, I never thought about that. Then you start to ask yourself some of credibility and engage in critical thinking. That's all I really want for you out of this class. That's what I remember. But if you walk out here with the idea that you need to look at things and you need to ask the right questions, you learn something. There you go. That's it for today, and we will get back together in a week's time. Enjoy your reconciliation day. And that is the title of YouTube's video. I don't believe we talk about it, and then not me, but post the video. And just edit it out. All right. Let me stop OBS, stop streaming. I'm streaming it. Yes. fun.
as like an investment.